Hello and welcome to this segment of Meet a Columban. My name is Fr Jim Mulroney and I'm your host today. Our guest today is Fr Vincent Busch, who is a Columban from the United States of America, and he's been working in the Philippines since 1973. And I want to extend now a special welcome to Vinny, and he's been working in the southern part of the Philippines in the province of Mindanao, which is an area where Indigenous people from the Philippines live, and the people that he has been connected with are the Subanen people. He works in a backup way to the Columban sisters, who have had a special mission among the Subanen people for about 40 years now. They've learned a lot about their culture. They've learned to tell the story of Christianity and to tell the story of the world using the imagery and the cultural stories of the Subanen people. And for the last 20 years, Vinny has been involved in promoting projects which help the people with their livelihood. Now, specifically in the Columban world in Australia, many people have bought Christmas cards from the Subanen people, and Vinny is responsible for the creation of a workshop where these cards and other items are made and put together. So I'd like to welcome you, Vinny, and ask you, could you explain how you first came in contact with the Subanen people and how you ended up being quite deeply involved in this project?
Hi, Jim and everybody. Yes, I was working for many years in Columban ministry and parishes, and also in communications work and mission education, a lot of catechetical work. And about 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago, I got involved with working with tribal people. One of the reasons was that Columban fathers started many of the parishes in Mindanao, set up the infrastructure in these parishes, and then we got a huge influx of native vocations for the priesthood in Mindanao. And so these native priests, the Philippine priests, took over the parishes, which was one of our purposes, to set up the local church. So we were left with what would you do now that's both missionary and in line with our work? And I chose to, I was always interested in tribal work. I read a lot about, I grew up in an area in America called the Great Lakes. My parents are actually Canadian. And there was the Iroquois tribes there, and I became interested in the tribal people in the US even before coming to the Philippines. And so I enjoyed and read their spirituality, their relationship with the earth. So I wanted to get involved in that. Fortunately, the Columban sisters were already working with the Subanen people who were up in the mountains above our parishes. And so I didn't have to start at square one. I could join them, but I needed their guidance and their tutor, to be sort of a tutor under their tutoree, under their instruction as to what to do and not to do, how to present yourself, and what you can do. And so I thought they have such wonderful ability to make practical things with the environment around them, baskets, whether it's implements to be used in the homes, storage bins. They had cloth and so on. So I said, could we start a project which would use their native skill, their expertise and their ability to make beaded, especially their beaded necklaces, very simple, in such a way that they would learn, they would be able to market them and make a supplementary income that would be helpful to the Columban sisters as well, who were trying to save their environment, their agriculture, their culture, their dances, their language, starting their education programs so that they could read and write very well and couldn't be cheated because they knew how to read contracts. So the Columban sisters were doing the heavy lifting, you might say. And I was helping out by doing things. One of the things we made here is like these. You see one behind my head here. It's a mandala. And this one is a smaller one and even smaller. These little beaded circles here are made with tiny beads, so tiny, and each one is made with one piece of thread. If they break the thread, they have to start all over again. And they make a tree, for example, this is a tree here, out of one piece of thread with tiny beads. And that tree represents the tree of life. Here's a star, here's the solar system. And they made a beautiful solar system with the sun in the middle and all the planets in their actual colors. Here's a galaxy. Here's the Big Bang at the beginning of the universe. And we tell this whole story about the universe, and it's as a miracle, ongoing miracle of God, of God's creation. And God is involved at every effort. And each one of those little circles and each one of those little efforts has a little poem that goes with it that explains, for example, the tree, that explains how the Spirit invoked this part of creation. And this one, for example, says, the Spirit said, let heat and lightning stir the sea to animate its chemistry. And from that swirling pool of genes, let earth give birth to living beings, sprouting forth all kinds of things with fins and legs and roots and wings. So we made the story of creation come to life, and because the Subanen people are so close to their forest, to their streams, to their rivers, to their soil, and their connection with it. So we were able to use their native skills in weaving and beading and such to enhance their way of life. So that's how I got involved in it. And ever since, we've been continuing to do that. We started with only 4 Subanens, and now we're up at 1 year. We had about 80 weavers at one time working to help us and to help themselves and help their environment and their habitat.
Now, the Subanens are an indigenous people in the Philippines. And
that's right.
Like most indigenous people in the world, their traditions are very, very close to nature.
Yes.
But they're also people who have been colonized. And with colonization comes abuse and destruction of their culture. Sometimes they're driven from their land or from the traditional area where they grew up. You've seen it in your own country, the United States, with the American Indian. We've seen it here in Australia with the Aboriginal people, and also in New Zealand with the Maori people. In the Philippines, it seems to be the Filipino people from the northern area of the country that have colonized the southern areas of Mindanao. And they have both done a lot of damage to the land that the Subanen people live on through logging and mining and farming and other ways. And this has had devastating effects on the land that people traditionally made their living from. And it's not just their culture and their way of life which is taken away from them, but their ability to reap the crops and reap the products that they need to live. And while the artifacts that you've been showing us represent the imagery of their culture, there's also the productive side of their culture has been removed. And how do the people move towards coping with that?
Well, one of the items is there's always a legal battle going on. The
Right.
Columbans have always been supportive of legal methods to help people keep their ancestral lands. That's how it's expressed here in the Philippines, their ancestral lands. And that's going on. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is to keep the land fertile. So there's a reforestation program going on. Another one is to inform the local church as to what what native peoples and tribal peoples, indigenous peoples can teach us as a church. You're very familiar, and we all are now, with Pope Francis and his efforts with Laudato Si, the Ecological encyclical, in which he mentions the role of tribal people. And he calls nature a sacred book of God. But we all know that, like, we have wonderful catechesis for the Bible and for the sacraments and for our church history and the saints. We have wonderful catechesis, but we don't really have a catechesis yet prepared for the sacred book of God's creation. We have now this document by Pope Francis, and so we need teachers, catechists of that, and the tribal people are our catechists. We have to learn more about how to live within the limits of the natural world. And they've done it for hundreds of years. And we're now realizing that climate change is a result of our accelerated economies. We're filling the atmosphere with our exhaust fumes and such, and our oceans with pollution and plastics, and our rivers with toxic waste and everything. And we just can't keep this up. It was done in the past in the name of jobs and economy to keep us in work. And it's still used that way. You don't have to go too far to see people saying, I'm trying to support my family through this or that industry. And the church wants you to support your family. So we do have church teaching supporting that. But the real challenge into the future, and the tribals can help us do that, missionary challenge, is how to help support each other and our loved ones, our family, our close friends, and at the same time support the rest of the living world so that it can support us into the future. Now that's the dialogue between the scripture and the new scripture of creation. So this is, like you said, this is the challenge we have to face. So we're learning a lot from tribal people, and we have to. They don't sometimes even appreciate how much they do know about the cultures. As Columbans, we know that every culture is a way of being human. That's every culture, whether it's Japan or the lowland culture, the tribal cultures, or Pakistani cultures of various linguistic groups. It's a way of being human. And these ways of being human now are getting into contact with the culture of the planet itself. And I do a lot of reflecting on this and writing about it in terms of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The Paschal mystery is built into the story of creation. A simple example would be like the bursting of a star. If a star didn't die, it wouldn't create the heavy elements which we need for life. So it's in the death of that star that we resurrected, and the star lives in us now as creatures that were created from that star. So the life, death, and resurrection sequence is built into God's way of God's creation that we are learning through our new catechists. The tribal people are one, scientists are another. They're catechists to tell us how God's creation works in chemistry or biology, etc. We bring our faith to that, and our faith informs our understanding of science in such a way that we can give credit to God. So that's what I've been doing for years, but I learned this indirectly from working with the Subanen and the tribal people.
Would it be fair to say that as a missionary and as a teacher of Christian values and Christian faith, you cannot be a teacher until you first learned from your students?
Well, if you want to learn anything, teach. because but you know, catechists. Here's an example. I was walking down at the ocean side nearby, actually nearby here, only a few hundred meters away, about 35 years ago. And I was doing ecological reflections on the mysteries of the Rosary. And I was using quotes from the Bible, but I couldn't find one that was, you know, we have a quote about Jesus being born. It's in Luke and it's in Matthew. So that's not a problem. But we get to Mary, after her death, being taken body and soul into heaven. We call it the Assumption. And there was nothing in the Bible about it directly. You know, it's a tradition, you see, wonderful tradition. So I went down to the ocean, and nearby there were people washing their clothes out of a freshwater well. And I said, I need to find something from the Bible. And this elderly woman, grandmother, said, "Oh yeah, it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible." I said, No, you must be thinking about the resurrection or the ascension or something. And she said, No. And she runs in, comes out with her Bible. It's all shredded and well read. It's in the science, so that's the one book they love to read because it's in their own language. And she says, "Here's what Jesus said to Mary when she arrived in heaven." And I'm chuckling, you know, and I'm saying, well, this ought to be good. And she says, "Listen, this is what Jesus says to Mary when she arrived in heaven. Welcome, O favored one of my Father, and receive what has been prepared for you since the beginning of the universe, because I was hungry and you gave me to eat." And it's like scales falling from your head. It was always there, but we never read it that way. We always thought, when did we see Jesus? But Mary actually did. And that's where the inspiration for our cards comes from. This woman on the well, by the well in Ozama City, in Mindanao, who comes out and says, this is what Jesus says to his mother. "You clothed me. You were by my side when I was dying. You gave me drink. You sheltered me. You visited me when I was in prison there before I died. All of that is what you did. And because you did it to me, I'm going to make it the criteria for everybody. If they're going to get to heaven, they have to do what you did for me." And it was a wonderful catechesis. And so when we made our Christmas cards, and I'll show you some of them here. Here we have, I don't know if you can see it. Here's Joseph preparing the manger. Here's Joseph giving food to Mary. Here's Joseph preparing the manger, and here's Mary sleeping on the side. So they're helping each other. At the same time, they're taking care of each other, and they're taking care of Jesus. So this is the insight that you get from the people, and you get from the tribal people. They take care of each other. I was often thinking, what did the shepherds bring the three kings brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the manger. What did the shepherds bring? They probably bought firewood. They probably bought a sleeping mat. They probably bought some food. They brought the practical things that kept them and was supportive of the real needs of Mary and Joseph at that time. So our cards, we get so many compliments about our cards saying, this rings true. This looks like what was really happening in that manger. We get so many cards, they say, where Mary and Joseph appear as potted plants. They appear as, statues there next to the manger. This actually shows them working to feed, clothe, and protect and give shelter to Jesus.
I think you've demonstrated to us that you've been a wonderful student since you've been in the Philippines, and
Yes.
also explained that supporting little projects like the artifacts or buying the Christmas cards is actually supporting a whole lot more than just putting a little bit of food on the table or creating a little bit of extra income. As supporting a culture, as supporting something that can teach us really important lessons in our lives. We've been talking with Father Vinny Busch, who's working in the Philippines among the Subanen indigenous people. And we thank you, Vinny, for your time, and God bless you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank everyone in Australia for helping.
Thank you.